Shalom. Welcome to the Messianic Hour with Rabbi Scott Sekulow. The Messianic Hour is a program designed to give you insight into the Jewish roots of your faith. Rabbi Scott is also here to answer your questions and help you gain a deeper understanding of Bible prophecy. And now, here's your host, Rabbi Scott Sekulow.
Shalom and welcome to another edition of the Messianic Hour. I'm your host, Rabbi Scott. This show is dedicated to reaching the lost and educating the found. I want to encourage you to visit our website at rabbiscott.com. Also, you can now visit us on, of course, YouTube, the iPhone, soon to be the Android. We have our apps already up for the iPhone, though. And we're now showing our videos on Vimeo, so check out that as well. That way you can watch the whole thing on Vimeo at one time. You don't have to go to two separate things like you have to do in YouTube. So check that out. We have links to on our website as well. And I'm here, of course, with my lovely wife, Judy. We bring the gospel and the message from Yeshua, our Messiah, from a Jewish and Gentile point of view. And I'm glad you're with us today. We're going to be looking at Acts chapter 24 in the first half of the show. And then we're going to be talking about, Judy, kind of explain what we're going to be doing in the second half. It's kind of an interesting 10 Commandments, so to speak.
Well, if you remember, we had Ron Cantor on the show a few weeks ago talking about his book, Identity Theft. And he has come out with 10 reasons why the New Testament, or the Brit Hadashah, is Jewish. So we're just going to go over them and give everybody a little overview. And, of course, you know, his book is now published and out, so that they can get that and read it. It's gotten really good reviews, so we recommend that. And we have a link from our website to his, so check that out as well. And, you know, Judy, right now what we're hearing in Israel, the newspapers, people we're talking to, is be prepared for war. They're getting ready to do something with Iran. You've seen in the news this week how Bibi Netanyahu has been preparing the people. I read an article on Fox News talking about that it could be a month-long war with hundreds of Israelis possibly being killed with the attacks that could take place. So now more than ever, we need to really pray for the peace of Jerusalem. We need to keep those prayers lifted up. Very hefty things going on. Reports came to our president this past week, even verifying what the Israeli government has been saying for months, that Iran is much closer to a nuclear weapon than ever before. I think we're going to see an attack before the elections, and how that could really affect the elections as well, as we could see how our president could respond to Israel. It would be very interesting. A negative response to Israel could lose a big part of his vote, the Jewish vote. For some reason, Democrats are very Democrat in voting, and that could be a key block. It's one of the main reasons why Obama won the first time, and this could be a big part of the upcoming election. So we're going to have to be watching that. We need to be praying for Israel as well, that if they do have to attack, of course, that God's protection will be upon them. And we're going to see that take place. So I want to encourage you, again, go to our website, rabbiscott.com. If you haven't signed up for our newsletter, please do so. You get a free book, I Have a Friend Who's Jewish to You, and the prophecy card, 70 key prophecies, where they're found in the Torah, where they're fulfilled in the renewed covenant, just for signing up. Remember, we are a listener-supported show. You can sign up and help us there, and plant a tree in Israel as well, all at rabbiscott.com. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back to the Messianic Hour. I'm Judy Sekulow, and I'm glad that you're with us today as we are going to start on Acts 24. Rabbi doesn't think we're going to make it all the way through. We'll see. You never know. Depends how much he talks.
Well, there's a lot that kind of goes behind the scene. We have the situation of Paul being basically put on trial. The Sanhedrin have made accusations against him. They're going to be taking him in front of the governor of Judea, Felix, but we need to get behind the background before we get into the actual discussion, because there's some interesting little, this could be like a daytime soap opera. When I was reading over it, there's some very interesting twists and faces, and our friend Simon comes back into the picture once again. So let's dig in. Why don't you start, Judy?
Well, Felix was the procurator over Judea in the tradition of the worst there ever was. There wasn't anybody before him or after him that was as horrible as this man was.
He kind of made, Herod look like okay guy. That's how
Yes.
bad he was.
Yes. And he was already very unpopular with his Jewish subjects at the time because he had married the young princess Drusilla. Now, Drusilla was the youngest daughter of Herod Agrippa I. Now, Herod had a son who became Herod Agrippa II. But she was married when he met her to a Jewish man who he was a king who actually converted because they didn't want Drusilla to marry a non-Jew.
Right. Matter of fact, his brother, she actually had another sister.
Her niece.
Her niece, Josephus, the historian, tells us that the beauty of both of them were second to none in the area, but that she herself was even more beautiful than her sister, and her brother wanted to make sure that she married a Jewish man. So that's what you said. So he actually fell in love. The king fell in love with her. He was willing to do a quote traditional conversion. We know there is no conversion in the Torah, but he does this so that he could marry her. But yet someone else takes a fancy to her.
Well, and as we said, Felix had laid eyes on her, and he was completely smitten, and he was just determined to have her. So he was trying to figure out, what can I do to convince her to leave her husband and marry me? So he employed the services of a certain sorcerer from Cyprus to assist him. And in fact, Josephus, again, the historian, tells us that when he saw Drusilla, Felix saw Drusilla, fell in love with her, he sent a person whose name is Simon, one of his friends, a Jew he was, and who pretended to be a magician, and tried to persuade her to forsake her present husband and marry him, and promised that if she would not refuse him, he would make her a happy woman. Accordingly, she acted badly, so she left her husband, and because she was desirous to avoid her sister Bernice's envy, for she was very ill-treated by her sister on account of her beauty, she prevailed upon to transgress the laws of her forefathers, basically, the laws of Torah that talks about marriage and divorce and marrying a non-Jewish person, and she married Felix.
Right, so she not only went against her sister, but also her brother because of this. And it's interesting, we see actually Josephus, the reports of it, really falls right in line with Acts chapter 13, verse 8, where it talks about Simon. This is, on all accounts, the same Simon. So we see him popping up, now and then. You can see he was, and it's interesting because he mentioned that he pretended to be a sorcerer. This guy Simon was definitely an interesting character. I think he claimed to be a believer as well. As we see, the fruits have to bear out, and this is not what takes place. So we see here, though, that he does marry them, and then that's really an interesting situation with how it goes on. So why don't you bring it from there?
Well, the thing that we see is that now Felix and Drusilla's going to kind of come back towards the end of the story again, but they brought Rabbi Shaul to Caesarea. He's under kind of house arrest, and when he was sent, the commander of the Roman detachment in Jerusalem sent a letter that said, I found that the accusation had to do with questions about their Torah, but there was no charge against him that deserved death or imprisonment. I also ordered his accusers to present to you their case. So Felix had him imprisoned at Herod's palace, and they were waiting for his accusers to arrive from Jerusalem. It was about a 5-day journey before they got there, and we see that the high priest came to, along with several other elders from the Sanhedrin. Now, most likely, these were handpicked by Hananiah to make sure they were on his side, that they could. He's already experienced the persuasive arguments of Rabbi Shaul once. This time, he's going to make sure that he's got everybody on his side, and it's not going to happen again.
But there's something going on behind the scenes here. While he's waiting for them to come, Felix and his Jewish wife are talking to Paul. So we see here a influence going on. As a matter of fact, Felix gives him some leeway. He says, while he keeps him there in prison, he allows others to come visit and to see him and take care of his needs. So this is kind of a low level. You're in prison, but you're still going to be able to kind of do what you want, but within restrictions. And so I want you to finish up with that, what you were going with that.
We're going back to where he was.
Or we finished. I thought it was important to bring that in.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right, honey. You did one of those little things.
Sorry,
that
I thought I needed it.
Okay, well, that's fine. But we see that now the Hananiah has kind of retained the services of this Hellenistic lawyer to present their case, and he's introducing the charges. Of course, he's playing up with flattery to Felix, and this time when he begins delivering the charges, they've kind of been modified in order to represent this Roman court of law that they're in. And rather than accusing Rabbi Shaul on religious matters, they accuse him of civil and political crimes. Right. They're trying a different tack now. And he's really portrayed as this dangerous revolutionary and an instigator of civil unrest.
Because one of the things that Felix is concerned about is rioting, and as we've seen with the Jewish people, that this could, anything small thing would end up into a possibly big problem. And so as the governor, you want to make sure that this doesn't happen.
And there were 3 complaints that they lodged against Rabbi Shaul: that he stirs up riots among the Jewish people everywhere, he's the ringleader of a sect of Nazarenes, and he attempted to desecrate the temple. Right.
So they specifically used the term "the way." So that's what this group of Jewish men, that was their name. You had the Essenes, you had the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the ones who believed in Yeshua as Messiah. They were called the Way. It probably came from the fact that he is the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through him. So they kind of use that as the way of identifying who they are. And again, like you said, they're trying to make him look like he's a rebel rouser, causing all these troubles, making all these big scenes. Yet I love Paul's response. Why don't you share that?
Well, and some of these did have validity, because when he gives his rebuttal to this, basically he acknowledges that, okay, sometimes there were riots where I went. I didn't instigate them. They just didn't like what I was talking about. Right. And he says, in fact, he says when he was in the temple court, he says, my accusers did not find me arguing with anyone in the temple or stirring up a crowd in the synagogues or anywhere else in the city. And then he added that his original accusers weren't even there to testify in front of him right now. Right.
In fact, he said, for the last 12 days I've been there, back to Jerusalem, and none of this has taken place. You've seen what I've done, so he really tried to use that.
And he says, as for defiling the temple, he points out that he had come to the temple to present sacrifices, and that he was actually in a state of Levitical purity when he was accosted. So he really goes back and says he doesn't admit to being a member of the Way, which again, I think this just shows that this was a sect of Judaism that was accepted at that point in time. And he tries to bring in the resurrection again, which divides the Sadducees and the Pharisees, but it didn't quite work this time. But basically, by summarizing the second defense, Rabbi Shaul says, I believe everything that agrees with the Torah. I came to Jerusalem to offer sacrifices, and my original accusers are gone.
Right. And the key thing that's very interesting there, Judy, he's basically saying, look, I'm a religious Jew. Even as a believer in Messiah, where in Acts 24, he's still saying, I keep the Torah, I do all these things, just like they do, except I believe in the resurrection and that Yeshua is the Messiah. That was really the argument that he brought before them, to say, look, I'm as Jewish as you are. It's interesting, the church has given us this view that Paul is not Jewish. On the contrary, when you read the scripture, his Jewishness comes out in everything he does, including his defense. That's his main defense. Look, I'm a Jew. I keep the Torah, and I believe in Messiah.
And it's interesting that Felix was well acquainted with the Way also, which again just indicates that the Yeshua movement was very large and well known at the time.
That's right. We'll finish up
We're done.
We're done. So
We're done.
we made it with seconds to spare. We'll be back right after this break.